thank you all for coming on your Saturday and coming and visiting this show. Valentina, about a year ago we started just talking about having an exhibition here. And you know, in the art world, there's always a lot of talk. People talk all the time, but rarely does anything come from it. So I was surprised to see this happen, and I just want to thank Valentina. She is a pleasure to work with. She does what she says she's going to do. She does it on time, and she does it so beautifully. So I've been with lots of galleries in the years, and that's not always the case. As those of you who have had any long-time association with different galleries, it's not the case. So thank you, Valentina. So I'm going to divide it up into three little segments. I'm going to talk first about me, and then I'm going to talk about the women here, and then we're going to do question and answers. Okay? So first off, I want to kind of just give you a brief history of how I got to this point. It's been a kind of an odd and circuitous route. There's people in life that go through with kind of black clouds following them and little storm clouds above them, and it seems like if something bad's going to happen, it's going to happen to them. I am the opposite. Everything from when I was a little kid to right now has always been, everything's kind of gone in an amazingly good sequence, except there was a couple major hiccups along the way, but even those turned out to be okay. So I'm just going to give you a real brief dialogue. I'm fourth of six Irish kids, and so we grew up kind of lower middle class, and it just happened that my grandparents during World War II in the early 40s bought a house in Newport Beach on Balboa Island, and so that was a really cool place to grow up and be part of that. And it wasn't until till my childhood and my teens that it became a resort and a kind of a rich enclave of Orange County. And so it was odd for the people that were just living in this weird little beach town that all of a sudden that we were in a matter of years, we were all in a resort that people flocked to, and hotels, and I don't know if any of you have been there. So I had this funny upbringing that we're not wealthy. We weren't wealthy. We're not wealthy. But growing up in this kind of a privileged community, and so in high school I never fit in school at all. And my art teacher, and I think teachers are amazing, but my art teacher saw that there was this kind of wounded child here and wasn't fitting in and wasn't doing well, but loved to draw. So she got me my junior and senior year, just like at the Museum of Fine Arts, there's a Saturday art program for high school kids. There was one up in LA at the Otis Art Institute. And so she figured out how I could do that. So every Saturday my dad would drive me up, 45 miles to downtown Los Angeles, drop me off, and I would figure draw in the morning, and then he'd pick me up. And then we'd do that. So then by the time I got into my senior year, I had a really good portfolio, and I realized that the only way I was going to get out of this 6-kid family and all this craziness, the one word that was a beacon to me was college. I knew I could use college as my ticket out of Orange County and out of Newport Beach and out of all that. And so I was obsessive with my grades and doing all that. So I got a presidential art scholarship, and so I was able to pick the school that I wanted to, and I got out. And I already knew, because I love to draw, that I wanted to be I always knew I wanted to draw and do art. So that was a given. And so then I got into UC Santa Barbara, which had an amazing art program. And I did my undergraduate in drawing and figure drawing and etching, printmaking. And so that was really good. And then I wanted to go to UC Davis because my hero, Wayne Thiebaud, taught at UC Davis for my MFA, but I was given a full ride scholarship at Arizona State in Tempe. So I moved from Newport Beach to Santa Barbara. So if you've been to any of those cities, they're both beautiful coastal cities, to the desert, to Tempe. And then I did my MFA in drawing and printmaking, but I switched over to stone lithography. So I did that. And then I graduated in '79, and I immediately moved to San Francisco and got a teaching job. So many of you have heard bits of all this, but pretty much since kindergarten, I have been in school every semester. So now we're going on 61 years I've been in school. And my little joke is I don't think in seasons, I think in semesters. So I know there's a fall semester, spring semester, and summer. But every place I've ever been doesn't really have a winter, except we had a week winter, WEEK, a few months ago. So that was great. So I waltzed through 8 years of college. I had a $600 college debt, and that was my graduation present from my mother. And so I graduated debt-free, and I got a job right off the bat. And I had, when I moved to Tempe, Arizona, I did heads in Santa Barbara. And when I got there, they failed to tell me in my interview that they are not a figurative school. So the figure was not an option for their MFA program. So I did these architectural monuments that you didn't know who built them or when they were built or why they were built or where they were. You didn't know anything about them. They were just these kind of huge monuments that were out in the desert. I just transferred this information to a two-point perspective drawing. That's all I did. And so I did that for 2 years. And in the early 80s, there was a huge economic boom, especially with corporations. And there must have been a tax benefit for buying art because the corporations were buying like crazy. The Bank of Americas and all the oil and gas and all those. And so immediately after school, within a year, I was signed in LA, San Francisco, Atlanta, Houston, Dallas, and Denver. So I had all these galleries. So I was teaching, I was managing galleries, and then I kept thinking, where does this poor artist thing fit in? Because everything was easy for me. I had a huge studio in San Francisco, I had a great job, I had a good, everything was very good. And I thought, this is wonderful. This was not hard at all. And so then, so the 80s came, I lived in San Francisco. In 88, I had the opportunity to move to Houston, where one of my galleries was. And so I thought, well, I could never afford, I like to garden. And in San Francisco, I lived in an apartment. And I always wanted to have a house with a yard, that stuff. So I moved to Houston, and then my little rainbow bubble burst. So it was, lots of things happened. The whole economy in '88 started crashing and did a long time serious crash. So no one was buying art. I moved to Houston, which in '88 was pretty much, it's not the art community it was. There weren't any of these studio systems set up. And almost everyone was either sculptural or abstract painter. There wasn't anyone doing big heads. So I did that. And no one ever told me that unless you go to UT or to one of the, northern Texas, unless you go to school in Texas, you can't get hired in Texas as an art teacher. They don't want to see anyone from Santa Barbara or Tempe, Arizona. They don't want to see any of that. So I couldn't get a teaching job my first year at all. And then there was no sales. There was no anything. And then I had sort of an emotional crash. You all know I'm gay. And what happened, I moved to San Francisco in one of the biggest gay meccas in the world. They called it Ground Zero. They call it Ground Zero in the 80s now, but it wasn't known then. It was just kind of a big party city. And then in 81, AIDS came, right in the midst of all this stuff. And so, AIDS came, but it was always somebody else. It was always no big deal. Well, in about 84, one of my friends from Arizona had a big beach house in the Gulf of California, in one of those little beach cities. And he said, you can have it for 2 weeks, invite all your friends, and go down there. So I went down with 10 of my friends in probably December of 84 to this huge beach house. You walk down the steps and you're in the water. It was amazing. And of course, I was probably 29 at that point and wild, and I was with all my friends, and there was, everything was going crazy. So it was fun. So I have a little picture of me, and then it was probably more information than you all want to know, but then, there's 10 of us all standing on the steps of this amazing house. We're all in our little Speedos, and we're all drinking and laughing, and tan and young, and there was doctors and a dentist. There was 2 architects. We were successful. Everyone was doing great. So then 84 creeps into 85. We start dying. This little group of 10 of my best friends. And so by the time I got to San Francisco, Houston in 88, half of them were gone. And then by 91, I was the only one left in this little group of photographs. So the economy's going. I'm in a city that doesn't want to employ me. There's no one buying art, and I couldn't find a job, and then everyone's dead. And so I was just thinking, it's me next. I'm not any different than the other 9 guys, or the tens of thousands of men that were dying at that time across the country. So lots of people were dying. We weren't the only ones, of course. And so then I was like, oh my God, but I'm still here. I mean, I was still there then, but I didn't think I was going to even make it to the mid-90s at that point, because why should I? If 9 out of 10 are dead, it's going to be 10 out of 10. So then I had a little chat with myself. My little dream bubble world that I always thought was so cool and easy, and everything I wanted I got, crashed. And so I thought, well, okay, what do you want to do? And I said, Patrick, where were you the happiest? And I was the happiest in Santa Barbara, painting my big dumb heads. So I was like, okay, if you're going to die in a year or 2 years or 4 years, go out doing what you want to do. So I packed up, I pulled in everything from all the galleries, I packed it all up, and it's still packed. I haven't seen any of that stuff since the early 90s. And I started painting my big heads. And so I thought it would just be a cycle, but now it's 30 years later, I'm still doing my big heads. So that's where and I'll talk about the women in a minute. And eventually, at the very bottom, at Arizona State, we went through school in pods, and in my pod was 2 women. And one of them went to Clemson and headed the printmaking program, and one went to Mississippi State. So they were all keeping track of me, and she Linda, who was in Mississippi State, said, we have a guest lecturer position that they just made. They didn't have a position, but she talked to her department. And so I moved, remember my route, Newport Beach, Santa Barbara, Tempe, San Francisco, all real pretty cities. And when someone in California makes fun of another city or a state, it's always Alabama or Mississippi. That's where we make fun. Who would ever want to go to those two states? So I moved to Starkville, Mississippi. And who names a city Starkville? And it was really like a creepy horror movie. And I thought I was going to hate every second of it. And I fell in love with Starkville. Has anyone ever been to Starkville? It's on the Tombigbee River, and it's these rolling low hills. And on top of it, and apparently the hills are 10 acres. And apparently that was the homestead. You got 10 acres when they divided it up. And so there's all these little houses on top of the hills, little farmhouses. And I thought, there's dirt. I can buy one of these little houses for nothing. And they offered me a full-time tenure-track position. I thought, this is great. And then I thought, okay, I'm gay. I'm in Starkville, Mississippi. It's just a matter of time until I'm lynched from a tree and murdered. And so I didn't take that job. And I came back. I got a little job teaching drawing at the Art League of Houston. And then my good friend Arthur Turner taught at Glassell. And hi, Pat. Is this empty here? And so I was then the only job I could get was house painting, and so I was painting his partner's kitchen. And my friend went to a cocktail party in Houston, and there was a kid that didn't have his master's that was going to start teaching at Glassell. And I thought, what the hell? I have 12 years college teaching experience. I have the killer resume, and this kid that's not even out of school is going to get a job. So I blew up, and Arthur said, slow down. So he said, bring me your resume. I gave him my resume. The then director of the school was a guy named Dan Gorski, and I'm the only person he hired. He was only there for 2 years. He hired me, and I taught a fascinating class called The Investigations of Charcoal. So and it made with 6. And so we did so I had my little foot crack in the door, and I had never met Dan. He had just seen my resume, phoned me and said, propose something. I proposed it. It made. I did my 6 classes. On my 6th class, I took my 6 students down to my studio, and so we could spread out. And we did big charcoal rubbings and stuff. And my studio, we rented, 4 of us rented this big studio that's where Diverse Works was. And we rented it at 10 cents a foot. Well, in those 2 years, it had gone up to $1 a foot from 10 cents. But we had a 12-year contract or something. So the woman who rented it, they only took one name, and so we just voted. We were all friends. She realized that if she could get rid of the other 3 studio mates, she could just bankroll herself for the next 12, the remaining 10 years of the lease, because she could rent it out at $1 a foot and pay 10 cents. So it was a great deal. So she anonymously phoned the school, Dan, and said, there is one of your teachers that's illegally taking Glassell students off campus, and you know the liability, and you could be sued. And he was like, okay. So he phoned me up and he said, can you come in? And I said, yeah. And he goes, did you take people off campus? And I said, yes. And I had permission. I came in and let him know where we were going to be and how to contact. And so he said, I thought so. And he said, I'm so sorry. You did fine. It's okay. He said, our figure drawing teacher just quit. Can you teach figure drawing? And so my little toe in the door, I got a 1 figure drawing class, then 2 figure drawing, and then I built up the whole thing. And so that was in 92, I think. And so almost 30 years ago, I've been there, and they can't get rid of me. So until I die. And anyway, so that was how the whole progressed. And then in July 1st of this year, I will be starting my 11th year as dean. So I scratched and clawed and pried my way up from my investigations in charcoal drawing to the school. So I'm there. So then, okay, so let's talk about these. So in the summer of 2020, I was awarded a residency in Germany where I was going to go and live for three weeks and produce a body of work on, and then have a one-man show. So I was all excited about it. And one of my heroes is a German expressionist named Alexei Jawlensky. And you all know him. I always talk about his piece in the Beck collection. It's the big head, big surprise, big red head. And so I grew up looking at those my whole life. And so I wanted to do my residency on the show was titled My Imaginary Mentor, Alexei Jawlensky. And so, and he would, almost all his paintings were of a woman named, and I don't know how to say it in German, but it was Gayle. And it sounds like Gale, but it was like Galia, or it had a different pronunciation. So he liked to work with one model and do a whole series. And so one of the owner of this art residency was named Hans, and I asked him if I could, when I got to Germany, I could do a series on, one woman would meet with me once or twice a week, and my whole series would be based on drawings and paintings from one woman. And so he said, there's no one here that will do it, but my daughter, I talked my daughter into it. So whatever leverage he had over her, poor thing, so her name was Judith. So in that whole spring of the year, and there's a couple Judiths here. When you look at the list, I think there's about 6 of them. I did 40 Judiths in there. And so as I was working on the Judiths, COVID came along. The whole residency, and of course in Germany, closed down. It got closed. It got moved to this summer. And I just heard about a month ago that it got canceled, and now we're trying for 2022. But by now, so I finished my series on Judith, and I kept going with the women. So the interspersed in all this stuff are paper pieces and canvas pieces. The canvas pieces are all my studio pieces. Those are things that I don't work on at school. And in my studio, I don't start paper pieces. Everything else, I think there's 41, or maybe there's more. 40. There's a whole bunch of paper pieces. So the way, when I went to UC Santa Barbara, the way my figure drawing teacher would teach would be, we have the model. Her name is Cindy. She's going to be doing 4 5s, 2 10s, a 20, 20, and a 40. If you have any problem, I'll be in my office. And so that's how that was figure drawing in his world. And then at the end, he would critique and he would talk about the pieces. I thought as an artist, that's not how I was going to teach. So I teach in a different way. I have an easel facing the students, And then everyone is facing the model, so everyone paints the models, and then whatever the demonstration is that day, I'm doing up here. So when I was teaching 4 or 5 classes, I had a stack of, and a lot of them were just horrible dogs. When you paint in front of students, it's not easy because you embarrass yourself with how bad you are. But there were a lot of them. So I had this stack, and so when the Judith thing came along, I started pulling out these drawings and then readapting them. So some of them were old pieces, and so I would start just doing it. And so Judith became not a, there's still a chair. Judith became not a specific person, not Hans's daughter, but she became just this name for my women. And so I started working on it. In the 90s and in the early 20th, part of the 20th century, I painted almost only men. And so a lot of comments I'd get from people would be, do you ever do women? Are they always just men? And so that's why I decided, when Valentina said, yes, we're going to do a show, so I gave her 2 options. I was working on a series of George and Martha Washington. One of my favorite paintings is that famous George Washington where he has the real bright red cheeks and the big nose, and I love that painting. So I did a whole series of paintings on that. So I showed him the George Washingtons, and I showed the women, and of course she and I wanted this too, because it would have been a far different show. So she got Armando Rodriguez to curate the show, so that he came and picked out all the pieces. So everything that's on the wall is I forgot that he's taping and I'm walking. Is our pieces from demos that I've gone back in and reworked so that they look good. So my goal, I was going to see if there's okay. So imagine this is a big piece of paper. There's nothing here, right? So the job of an artist is to arrange stuff so that there is something there. And so, and there's that famous Magritte painting that we have one in Houston. It's at the Menil, and it says it's a smoking pipe. It's about that big. And it's a smoking pipe, and in the bottom of it in French, it says, "This is not a pipe." You've all seen it. Everyone makes fun of that painting. I think it's such an important painting because he's reminding us that there is no pipe there. It's just paint. And so there are no women on the walls here. It's just arrangements of muds. Beige muds and brown muds and orange muds and pink muds. And we arrange the muds in such a way that all of a sudden we get a girl or a woman or whatever. And so it's an illusion. It's a magic trick. There's no woman here at all, right? We all know that. It's just a storyline. So it's so undifferent than a novel. It's just the same as a novel. In a novel, you pick up a book, and there's all these black marks in a novel, little scratches all over the place. And because we're familiar with that language, we put those little marks together and say, oh, the character, she's in a train, she's going across the field, the snow fields outside of Moscow. We're in winter. And we're in this cold train, and there's something happening in the train. And so all of a sudden, it triggers our imagination that we're in that train, and we're looking off at the snow plains and whatever mountains are in the distance, and we get that. But there is There is no mountains, there's no train, there's no snow, there's no nothing. It's these little black squiggles on a piece of white paper. And so that's what also painters, that's what artists are. Whether you're a musician or a choreographer, a writer, a drawer, a printmaker, we arrange stuff to take you guys into journeys into the realm. So, the two journeys I had an opportunity to do was George and Martha Washington. And what do I know about George and Martha? Nothing. And then women. And people say, okay, this is pretty ludicrous. You're a gay man. What the hell do you know about women? And right, I was ready to justify it, because in my world, as dean of the Glassell faculty and students, the school is 85 to 92% women. The office is, except for Joe, my life is all about reading women's thoughts and, and knowing, like, back up, all that. So although it is kind of a lurch there, I had this enormous body of work for women, but it could have been just expressions. Could have been another title, because that's what I'm trying to do is for each of them is to pull you into her, and to look at her body language, her expression, her values. What colors did I use? What composition did I use? Editing. We as visual artists have about 8 categories that we can vary. And so just like an author, they can pick poems, they can pick novels, and what kind, there's all sorts of opportunities for a writer to choose different venues too. So between all those, I can vary my storyline by changing the value systems, by changing my editing, by changing the costume. Does she have a shirt on? Does she not have a shirt on? Does she not have pants on? What does she have on? What is her hair? How big is she? What is her expression? And so my goal is, as an artist, is to pull you in to hopefully one or two will grab your attention, and you'll be able to see different things. So if we look at a group up there, one of my favorites is that really pink one, and how her head is just slightly cocked, and she's just dead staring you down. And to me, there's a kind of a wonder going on, and it might not be a good wonder. It might be like, you did not just say that, right? You are, whatever. So there's all sorts of stuff. I also use different things in like these two that are just to the right of the type. There's people within people there. And so a lot of times we have people that have been important to us in our lives, and so we that are significant and are part of us. And so in some, like in those two in particular, there's different shadows of is it a child of yours? Is it a true love you had? And so the goal that I have is that I want you to be able to look at these people and work with them, stay with them, and ask yourself what is it about them? Because if you don't care about if you go into a gallery and you see a piece of art and you don't even stop and see it, you're not reading it. But it doesn't mean it's a bad piece of art. Again, all my students have heard this 100 times. Art is like food. Just because you don't like peanut butter doesn't make peanut butter bad, or sushi, or roast beef, or whatever it is. It doesn't make it bad, it's just you don't like it. And so there's a lot of people that don't like figurative art, that they like abstract art. There's a lot of people that don't like drawing, they like photography, So we're not doing a judgment call here, bad or good. But the one thing I think that if you can take home anything from this lecture is that life is short. We're all going to be dead. Not soon, but whenever we're going to be dead. We got to do what we love to do. You have to do that. And so that was back in '88 when I had the little talk with myself, and I said, what do you want to do, Patrick? And it was like I knew I wanted to do art because I have just that is one of my passions, but I wanted to do big heads basically, and so then I went to do that. And then one of the things that when I look at art through the art from the 20s or art from the 17th century, art from the 50s or 80s or whatever, the one thing that prevails that for me, whether it's abstract or figurative or whatever, is the quality of the piece itself. So we as artists have two huge duties. One is you have to be saying something important to you. If you're saying something important that is fascinating to you, it's going to be fascinating to other people too. And the second thing is it has to be well done. We've all read books before where all of a sudden something's misspelled. And we're like, oh my God, they used, If something's well painted, whether it's abstract or figurative or landscape or realistic or whatever it is, if it's well painted and there's an interesting story, chances are you'll have a home run. But there's so many people jump into the storytelling thing and don't have the craft skills behind them. They're not taking the photograph all the way to how it would look best, or the painting isn't well done, and so you just look at it and it looks weird. And I'm not saying all these are well done, but the way that you're going to get things where you are a good painter is by practicing, like you all told your little children when they took their piano lessons. You have to practice a lot. And so the more you do it, the more control you have over your hand and your eye and your equipment. So if I can stress anything, it is become good at your craft. Your stories, we all have stories. So we need to tell those stories. And then we also need to figure out what is interesting. A friend of one of my childhood friends, I've been writing to him since college when I went to Santa Barbara. And so we write, it's like a pen pal. And we're still, now 40 or 50 years later, I'm still writing them. And so we just write a bunch. And he's retired now and he's studying poetry. And so one of the things that he's saying is how important it is for him to write every day. Because his poems, he looks at his poems from a year ago or from 10 years ago, and they don't have the finesse that he has of the poems that he's seen today. So you always have to be working to hone in with your eye brain and your hand coordination, and you always have to be thinking about stories that are interesting. You have to make them interesting. Otherwise, who cares?